Hazel Scott, the sophisticated diva of classics, was not only the first African-American woman to host her own television show, but she also bravely stood up to the House Un-American Activities Committee and the Hollywood studio machine. The gifted and popular performer dazzled audiences in the U.S. and abroad with her jazzy renditions of classical works. Hazel Dorothy Scott was born in Port of Spain, Trinidad, on June 11, 1920. She was the only child of R. Thomas Scott, a West African scholar from Liverpool, England, and Alma Long Scott, a classically trained pianist and saxophonist. Little Hazel was the family's pride and joy in every conceivable sense. A remarkable child, a prodigy. She read at 3 and was discovered to have perfect pitch at 3.5, played the piano at 4, and was improvising at the piano at age 5. Hazel surprised everyone with her ability to play by ear when she would scream with displeasure after one of Alma's students hit a wrong note. No one in the household recognized the sensitive ear she possessed. They had been amused, but no one regarded my urge as a latent talent, she recalled, until one day, young Hazel made her way to the piano and began tapping out church hymn, Gentle Jesus, a tune her grandmother Margaret would sing to her at nap time. From that moment on, Alma shifted her own focus of her own dreams of becoming a concert pianist and dedicated herself to cultivating her daughter's natural gift. They were a tight-knit pair, sharing an extremely close bond throughout their lives. She was the single biggest influence in my life, Hazel said. Her father, on the other hand, would soon leave the family and have a very small presence in his daughter's life. Following the breakup of her parents' marriage, the three of them, mother, daughter, and grandmother, would migrate to the United States in search of a greater opportunity for themselves and a gifted young pianist. In 1924, they headed to New York and landed in Harlem, where Alma took a job as a domestic maid. She struggled, but she was able to return to what she knew best, music. She taught herself the saxophone and eventually joined Lil Hart and Armstrong's all-girl orchestra in the early 1930s, then organized her own women's orchestra, American Creolians, with Hazel playing the piano and doubling on brass. Alma's associations with well-known musicians made the Scott household a mecca for musicians, according to Hazel, who benefited from the guidance and tutelage of jazz greats Art Tatum, Lester Young, and Fats Waller, all of whom she considered to be like family. In 1928, Hazel auditioned for enrollment in the prestigious Juilliard School of Music. She was only 8 years old and too young for the standard enrollment. Students had to be at least 16, but because of some influential nudging by wealthy family friends and Alma's sheer determination, Hazel was given a chance. Her performance of Rachmaninoff's Prelude in C-sharp minor made a strong impression on staff professor Oscar Wagner. He proclaimed the child a genius, and with the permission of the school's director, Walter Damrosch, offered her a special scholarship where he would teach her privately. Career progress was swift. A spirited young woman with an outward demeanor that was effervescent and engaging. Hazel's life was not that of an ordinary teenager. While still in high school, Hazel hosted her own radio show on the WOR after winning a local competition and performed gigs at night. At times, she felt burdened by the demands of her talent, admitting, "There were times when I felt that I just couldn't go on." Still, she managed to graduate with honors from Wadley High. Not long after, she made her Broadway debut in the musical revue Sing Out the News. Commercial recordings of her Bach de Boogie repertoire on the Signature and Decca labels would break sales records nationwide. When she opened at Cafe Society downtown, Hazel Scott took New York by storm by the unprecedented way she played the classics. Had anyone before ever come to a New York nightclub to hear a pianist perform Chopin or Liszt? Scott, however, has so perfected her unique way of transforming the classics into swing ballads that audiences couldn't resist her. She began her classical numbers in a conventional way, then gradually changed the rhythm, letting the boogie-woogie notes creep in until finally, Hazel Scott just gave into the sounds within her and pounded the keyboard as if any minute might be her last. And the entire nightclub swayed and jumped to her original sounds. Initially brought into Cafe Society as a 3-week replacement for ailing blues singer Ida Cox, she was such a knockout success that the club became her home. When Cafe Society Downtown moved uptown to 58th Street, Hazel Scott went with it. Her album, Swinging the Classics, nearly broke sales records. Her non-classical discs, Mighty Like the Blues, Calling All Bars, and Boogie Woogie sold well too, and remained definitive period pieces. Throughout the era, she had class bookings: the swanky Ritz-Carlton Hotel in Boston, the huge Paramount and Roxy Theaters in New York, and the prestigious Carnegie Hall, when in 1940, she played Liszt's second Hungarian Rhapsody to rave reviews. Of her latter performances, a critic wrote, "It was the most imprudent musical criticism since George Bernard Shaw stopped writing on the subject. It was witty, daring, modern, but never irreverent. I think Liszt would have been delighted." And the stories that ran on leading mass publications of the day verified Hazel's complete crossover entry into the cultural mainstream. There was little separation between Hazel's performances and her outspoken politics. She attributed it to being raised by very strong-willed, independent-minded women. She was one of the first Black entertainers to refuse to play before segregated audiences. Written in all of her contracts was a standing clause that required forfeiture if there was a dividing line between the races. Why would anyone come to hear me, a Negro, and refuse to sit beside someone just like me, she asked. By the time Hollywood came calling, Hazel had achieved such stature that she could successfully challenge the studio's treatment of Black actors, demanding pay commensurate with her white counterparts, and refusing to play the subservient roles in which Black actors were commonly cast. She would wear no maid's uniforms or washerwoman's rags, and insisted that her name credit appear the same in all films, Hazel Scott, as herself. She performed in 5 major motion pictures in the early 40s, including I Do'd It, directed by Vincent Minnelli and featuring Lena Horne, and the Gershwins' biopic Rhapsody in Blue. But it was on set of The Heat's On, starring Mae West, that Hazel's characteristic brashness was unleashed. In a scene where she played a WAC sergeant during World War II, Hazel was angered by the costumes the Black actresses were given to wear. She complained that no woman would see her sweetheart off to war wearing a dirty apron. Hazel promptly staged a strike that went on for 3 days, a battle that was finally rectified by removing the aprons from the scene altogether. The incident came at the cost of Hazel's film career, which was short-lived as a result of her defiance. "I've been brash all my life, and it's gotten me into a lot of trouble. But at the same time, speaking out has sustained me and given me meaning to my life," she said. Hazel Scott was about as elegant and sophisticated as they come, a blazing symbol of the contemporary Black woman, completely at home in the most continental settings. Striking as Scott's movie appearances were, her scenes were cut when films were shown in the South. Still, she reached large audiences, appearing always as herself, beautifully dressed and coiffed. As a social symbol, her classical bent placed her in a rarefied atmosphere. Yet anxious to promote and publicize herself, she was aware that while white patrons came to hear her new renditions of the classics, it never hurt to give them something to look at the same time. On occasion, she was criticized for exploiting her sexuality. Usually, she wore low-cut dresses, her eyes were flirtatious, and sometimes she had an insolent smile that was a bit suggestive, part come on, part pull back, but she still remained the lady. When she went into her swing music, her sexy body movements snapped the audience into attention. In 1945, political momentum was added to Scott's public image when she married Harlem preacher and congressman Adam Clayton Powell Jr. Powell pursued her unabashedly, even though he was already married. At first, she was annoyed by his advances, but eventually, irritation gave way to real interest and passion. The couple began seeing each other in secret amidst a great deal of scandal. But Scott, a proud woman, seemed oblivious to the criticism as she went from one dazzling concert performance to another, never giving up her career and remaining for years more famous than her husband. The two had a son, Adam Clayton Powell III, and they were seen as the modern Black couple, educated, well-traveled, attractive go-getters, and doers. They were stars, not only in the Black world, but in the white world. That was extraordinary, commented journalist Mike Wallace at the time. In the summer of 1950, Hazel was offered an unprecedented opportunity by one of the early pioneers of commercial television, the Dumont Network. She would become the first Black performer to host her own nationally syndicated television show. As a solo star of the show, Hazel performed piano and vocals, often singing tunes in one of the 7 languages she spoke. A review in Variety stated, "Hazel Scott has a neat little show and its modest package. Most engaging element in the air is Scott's personality, which is dignified yet relaxed and versatile." But before she could fully enjoy her groundbreaking achievement, her name would appear in red channels, the unofficial list of suspected communists. Hazel's associations with Cafe Society, which was a suspected communist hangout, along with her civil rights efforts, made her a target for the House Un-American Activities Committee. Since she was neither a member of the Communist Party or a communist sympathizer, she requested to appear voluntarily before the committee despite her husband's admonitions against it. Hazel Scott spoke up in an impressive 14-page statement. She denounced the red channels as guilt by listing, a lie, and a vile and un-American act. Going a step further, she later proposed that in the future, musicians and artists unions should boycott the very radio networks and sponsors that had suspended entertainers listed in the book without proof of disloyalty. She was one of the few performers, Black or white, determined to fight it out. The entertainment community applauded her fortitude, but the government's suspicions were enough to cause irreparable damage to her career. Weeks after the hearing, the Hazel Scott show was canceled, and concert bookings became few and far between. Around the same time, her marriage to Powell was crumbling under the weight of career demands, too much time apart, competitive jealousy, and infidelity. After 11 years of marriage, the couple decided to part ways. Hazel sought refuge overseas. With her young son in tow, she joined the burgeoning Black expatriate community in Paris. Her apartment on the right bank became a regular hangout for other American entertainers living in Paris. James Baldwin, Lester Young, Mary Lou Williams, Dizzy Gillespie, and Max Roach were regular guests, along with musicians from the Ellington and Basie bands. Hazel's music softened during the Paris years. She played more serene tunes with less and less of her old boogie-woogie style. On a brief visit to the States in 1955, she recorded Relaxed Piano Moods with Charlie Mingus and Max Roach on a debut label, an album now considered by jazz critics and aficionados as one of the most important jazz recordings of the 20th century. Most recently, it was inducted into the National Public Radio's Basic Jazz Record Library. After her divorce from Powell in 1961, she had a short-lived marriage to a European, Inziel Bedin. That same year, she appeared in the film Night Affair, and she was back in the papers once more when Powell was accused of having falsified her 1951 tax returns. During Powell's tragic decline in the 1960s, Hazel Scott took on yet a new admirable dimension when she refused to publicly criticize him. After a decade of living abroad, she would return to an American music scene that no longer valued what she had to offer. Replaced by R&B, the Motown sound, and the British bands, jazz was no longer popular music, and Hazel Scott was no longer a bankable talent. Once the darling of Cafe Society, Hazel continued to perform, playing small clubs to a devoted fan base, perfecting her style, and constantly exploring new ways of expressing herself musically. She made a few recordings and even took small roles in soap operas. Hazel Scott passed away from pancreatic cancer on October 2, 1981, just 2 months after her final performance. Though she may not be as widely recognized as many of her contemporaries, her legacy as one of the pioneering women in entertainment endures. Hazel Scott, an extraordinary talent, uniquely took the classics to new heights. This stunning, gorgeous, sophisticated diva brought class and dignity to the image of Black women. She was a true freedom fighter for her people, sacrificing her career in a struggle for equality and justice. She was ahead of her time, but we are grateful she was there to pave the way. Hazel Scott, sophisticated diva of classics and Onyx Queen.
I'm Hazel Scott. I'd like you to meet the members of my trio. We have Charlie Mingus on bass and Rudy Nichols on drums. We'd like to do our version of A Foggy Day for you. I was a stranger in the city, out of town were the people I knew. I had that feeling of self-pity, what to do, what to do, what to do. The outlook was decidedly blue, but as I walked through the dreary streets alone, it turned out to be the luckiest day I know. A foggy day in London town had me up and it had me down. I viewed the morning with much love. The British Museum had lost its charm. How long, I wondered, could this thing last? But the age of miracles hadn't passed, for suddenly I saw you there, and in foggy London town the sun was shining everywhere. foggy London town, the sun was shining everywhere. A foggy day.
If you enjoyed this video, please share, like, and subscribe to this channel. Thank you for watching.